So I just wanted to go over the difference between a points ignition system and an electronic ignition system like it used to have, and kind of sort of currently does, just without the ECU, because it's got the HEI thing going on. So this is with the EFI and the ECU and everything. So it's got this that rotates with the cam gear, and that's got these little references here, and I'm guessing it's some sort of a magnet that sends a signal to the ECU, and then that tells it when to spark. All that's controlled by the brain of the car. Now, I don't have an ECU anymore, so what's controlling that instead is, you look deep inside of there, as I rotate the cam gear down here, those little arms separate, and that brake in contact tells the ignition coil when to send the spark, and that corresponds with wherever this arm is. Where did the cap go? Back in the distributor box. And as that rotates, that arm references one of these points, which is attached to a spark plug, and that break in contact causes a spark at the spark plug, and that's called a points ignition, where it's physical points. Now, kind of like a welder tip, those things wear out as they arc over and over again, but cheaper to set this up with the Duralast parts than to buy a nicer HEI distributor. So this is what I'm going with. Budget's kind of the determining factor here, so either way, should work just fine. And then I had to get a separate ignition coil because it's no longer on top of the distributor cap, and I just went with what they had in AutoZone, which is an SL Super Stock. Part number is 8140C. And I had to modify a wire set. Basically what I did was, it requires a male contact to go in here, but I didn't have one. The only ones I had was for my welder generator, and just looking at the size difference, I didn't really want to take that risk at this not being the right size, but it needed one of these style connectors to go in it, and all this wire set came with was this style that references the male end on these. So I had to change things up a little bit. I cut the back end out of that, and back end, and kind of pinched it. Where is it? Now, I've found that the easiest way to do this on the 351s in the van is to take off the alternator. Even the 302, honestly, there's a little more space at the 302, but it's best to just take off the alternator, because I'm going to be rotating the crankshaft anyway, so you're going to want all these belts unhooked, and it's going to give you better access to cylinder number 1, which is right here. The way I'm going to find top dead center is I'm just going to find a compression stroke, and then put a little screwdriver in there and kind of watch it as I rotate, find where the dwell is, and then just double check and make sure that's right on the harmonic balancer there. And if that's all good, if it's not, then I'll need to order a new harmonic balancer to actually time it right, but we'll see. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and pop off this alternator. So I figured I might as well go over what I'm doing here. Basically, 5/8 wrench to detension the belt. There's a 14 mil up here, at least that's what I'm using to take it off, and then a 16 mil down there, whatever that translates to. It's probably whatever the standard size is. And pop the belt off, unbolting those. I disconnected the batteries first, and now I'm taking off the electrical connector before I pop off this bottom bolt. One of them is just a plug in, the other one's a 10 mil. Nonetheless, so I need to take that out, retap, and maybe a bigger size, and then for now I want to take it off. I have a bypass pulley, but I was wondering if I could retrofit that alternator there, and then I have 2 alternators in here. Maybe have some sort of a second output for them with some diodes so it doesn't go back and blow anything else up, but I guess the only thing to blow up is my batteries now that it's carbureted, which I don't even think it would. But I could have a 24 volt side and maybe make some sort of like a welding transformer type of deal. Anyways, now that that's all done, I'm gonna go ahead and unplug cylinder number 1, get that spark plug out of there. Now cylinder number 1 is the cylinder closest to the fan on the passenger side on these 351s. I believe it's the same on the 302. Now you could do this without taking the alternator off, but I don't know if you can see how much space I just created for myself. It's like a straight shot. Here, I'll take you out of the zoom. It's like a straight shot to that spark plug, whereas the alternator would have been in the way. You would have had to reach around, or you could do it from the doghouse and you would have been blind, essentially. So this makes it much easier. It's a worthy couple of minutes to do if you are going to do this. Still not sure what I'm going to put this video under, because right now I'm switching from HEI to points, but I don't think most people in their right minds are seeking to do that. I mean, I'm not loyal to one or the other. I'm still trying to find out which one's better, honestly, I guess, for this. But granted, I'm buying a much higher quality points distributor than I did HEI. Like I said, that's really the determining factor here, was the price difference. But either way, thinking maybe this will just be a general how to replace your distributor. So if any of you guys actually watch my channel repeatedly, or regularly I guess, made this little guy, and I'm gonna use that here, because the regular ratchet doesn't really give me good access. Or not good access, it does give me good access, but it's just, I don't think I've shown this tool in actual use on a video yet, so. Funky angle here will probably be the perfect way to on the damn spark plug. That probably is what my problem is here. I broke it loose and it still wasn't hand tight or able to do by hand, so I'm wondering if maybe I over tightened this one. Not that it makes that big of a difference, but generally speaking, when I do torque them to spec, which is not often, they just come out by hand as soon as you break them loose. But I'll put that roll of paper towels right here. I'm going to roll one of them up and stuff it in the spark plug hole on cylinder number 1. And then I'm going to rotate the crankshaft bolts until this thing shoots out. So unfortunately, my camera died while I was taking the video of this, but basically what's going to happen is you're going to hear like a pop, and that piece of paper towel is going to shoot out of the cylinder, and then that's how you're going to know you're under compression stroke. And once you're there, if you have a buddy, it'll make this a lot easier, but if you have to do it alone, you can. I mean, you might have to have a little bit long arms, and it's going to be hard either way. It's not going to be great to do on your own, but it's doable. So basically, you're going to set a screwdriver inside of the spark plug hole to touch the top of the piston. You're going to keep rotating the crankshaft pulley, or the crankshaft bolt, until that stops moving upward and starts moving downward. And then you're going to go back the other way just a smidge, because it's not really going to hurt it to do that, until it stops moving upward, maybe even a little bit till it starts moving downward. And then you're going to make sure your last turn is the direction of rotation for the crankshaft. Clockwise, go back up until it stops moving up, and try to find right at that dwell point that's going to be your actual true top dead center. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go down and reference that with your harmonic balancer. Make sure those marks are lined up where they should be on that, so you know that that's accurate. That way when you do go to use your timing light, you know your marks are accurate. So like I said, camera died for that part, so unfortunately I missed a bunch of important details here to actually show, but sorry about that. Here's the rest of the video. So just real quickly before I throw this thing in the car, I'm going to show you how to set the vacuum advance on it. And now there's a huge debate on how to do this and which one's better, manifold vacuum, or metered vacuum, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to tell you that I am running it on manifold vacuum and not metered vacuum. So that being the case, one thing I know about my vehicle is that when I am at part throttle, which is what the vacuum advance is for, it's when you're barely on the gas cruising, it's supposed to be at its maximum advance. I know that my vacuum is pulling about 14 to 16 when I'm at part throttle. Probably closer to 14. I'll just say air on the lower side. It's not going to hurt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up, the diaphragm, so that it engages fully at about 14 pounds of vacuum. Now, the way I'm going to do that is it's got this little brake bleeder thing that's just a vacuum hand pump. I got it set to vacuum. Make sure you don't have it set to pressure and blow this whole thing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep clicking it real short strokes until this stops moving, and then check what I got. No more movement. Well, that's pretty close right there. It's at about 16. I'm going to back it off to say 15. I think that's where I should be, is at about 15. Now, one thing to note, when you're at part throttle, if I'm not mistaken, it is exactly the same vacuum on part throttle as it would be, same vacuum at part throttle on the metered vacuum on the side of the carburetor as it would be on the manifold. I think that this only makes a difference at idle. And I mean, I guess it depends on whether you're running super lean at idle, whether you want a bunch of advance, because if I'm not mistaken, when you have a very lean mixture, you want a little bit more advance, but I could be wrong about that. Wrong, or maybe it's just debatable. I don't know. I tend to run more advanced when I lean out the mixture, which is, I mean, you don't want to go too lean and you don't want to go too much advanced. It's like a sweet spot. I'm just kind of giving you a general rule of thumb here. It's moving. It didn't move. And we're at more. Did I tighten or loosen that? I must have done something wrong there. Let me run that test one more time. Yeah, that's less. So that's at 15. We'll go a little less than that. Yes, I'm doing this inside of my other truck because I just ran to the store. I'm about to run to the store to grab another drink, so maybe even a beer since I'm feeling like spoiling myself. I'll go just a hair tighter on that. Now this is, for this particular Duralast one, I'm using a... I thought Wea put it on the side. This is the only Wea tool I own is their Allen wrenches. I got these as a machinist, and I'm pretty sure the shop I work for bought them for me, and they let me keep them when I got laid off, but I don't know what size this is, but basically it's just a little itty-bitty Allen wrench, and you stick it inside of the vacuum diaphragm like nipple, and you tighten it to reduce the vacuum required to engage it. You loosen it to increase the vacuum required to engage it. Now, if you're in like a V6 or maybe a smaller car, your truck's pulling more vacuum than mine, you're going to want less. If you're swapping the cam and you're doing a bunch of other crap, it's dropping your idle vacuum, you're going to want to have this tightened more because you're going to be pulling less vacuum. But anyways, that's just basically a gist on how to adjust one of these things. Now, as far as installing the distributor back in the truck, it goes in pretty much the same way it came out, but a little trick to make this easier going forward. I found it's a lot easier to line up the vacuum diaphragm as close to the the AC compressor as you can, or maybe it's just a bypass pulley if you don't have AC. That way you can advance it more, because you're probably not going to be retarding the timing less than top dead center. I can't think of a reason why you do that unless you're just being incredibly conservative for some reason. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to line it up. Now this cap has a labeled spark plug number 1, so I'm just going to use that. It's in a different spot than I did on the old one with the cheap HEI I had. I did not label it, so I don't know if that labeled number 1, because I think this cap can go on 2 different ways. So Nope, it can only go on one way. So yeah, that's number 1 for sure. And I'll just do what it says. And I'm gonna have that lined up with wherever the rotor is. Since I know I'm at top dead center, I basically want it lined up towards firing right at top dead center. And the reason you want it lined up with this compressor, because in order to advance it, you're gonna be rotating it clockwise. And you'll have more space to do that. You won't run into your upper radiator hose. Maybe yours is set up slightly different than mine, and it doesn't look like this, but... Because see, now I'm firing right at top dead center, and I have no way to advance it. That's why I was saying line it up that way. But the cam gear is only going to let it slide in really one way, so you're going to have to keep popping it out and kind of changing it up. Where it's at right now, it looks like it would be firing right dead nuts on top dead center. So I'm going to advance it a little bit past that, pop it out, put it in again, just so I can try to maximize the amount of adjustment I'm going to have here. And stuff. So that's top dead center. Cylinder number 1, top dead center. I got advancements, and if fucking for some reason necessary, I got the ability to retard it too. Alright, so the only real difference for the connector on the power side of the coil was that it used to be a blade connector on that HEI, and on this one it's a hole and bolt, just a bolt eye connector, you know. And just gonna crimp that on. Now I've just got the coil zip tied to the mounting point for the old coil bracket. I actually think it was on the passenger side, but the valve cover has a copycat of that over here. This is gonna have to work for now. I will go back and revisit that to make a little sturdier of a mount, because you don't really want your ignition coil failing on you randomly. It's less than ideal, but there's no reason those zip ties should just break. It might come loose and vibrate like a son of a bitch, though, which would be very annoying to hear. I don't know if my little lace is blocking the camera right now, but the lace from my sweater just hopped over. Oh, it wasn't nice. There we are. Sturdy. Call that good. As far as the power goes, and then the ground is just coming off of the distributor, because the distributor is grounded to the block, and there's a little, at least on this one, there's a little ground wire hanging off. So I just went ahead and threw that on there. So with that all wired up, I just got to plug the plug wire into the distributor and should be good to go. Alright, so for anybody who does not know, here is basically all the information you need for what I'm about to go over. Because the next step, I'm just going to pop that cylinder number 1 spark plug back in, throw all the plug wires on, and then the alternator, and then I'm going to go ahead and set the timing and make sure everything's proper. It's almost certainly not exactly where it needs to be. There's no way I just set that right from the jump. That's basically impossible. But anyways, this is the firing order here for the 351. I think it's the same for the 302. And the distributor rotates counterclockwise. So just, you know, screenshot this, save this, whatever you got to do. I just wrote that little top part in. This is just a Haynes manual for the vehicle. That's handy information. I think that's actually the same for almost all Ford V8s, including the 460, at least in this era. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. But here's that information that's going to help. What I just went ahead and did was, since cylinder number 1 was already marked on my distributor, I went ahead and just drew in the rest of the numbers, so that way it's easier for me to just pop them on there and know where they're at. because the cylinder numbers are pretty easy. 1 through 4 on the passenger side, 5 through 8 on the driver's side. And then just make sure that the cylinders correspond with where they're at on the distributor. That way your firing order isn't messed up. And then once you got all that set up, throw the alternator back on and it's ready to be timed. Now, I'm sure any old method you use to get this belt on is going to work. It's really not that complicated. But what I like to do is route it onto everything, including the tensioner pulley, and leave it off of whatever accessory is the most accessible, which in this case is my air compressor, or AC compressor. I guess it's still compressing air, it's just in this case it's cold air. So same thing, 5/8 wrench on the tensioner. Make sure everything's lined up on all the pulleys so you're not gonna strip this belt. Now I'm putting on an old belt. I carry a spare belt on this thing at all times, and this belt here is under warranty, so I'm pretty much just waiting for this to grenade itself. I'll swap the belt and then get this one replaced so that I have another spare belt. But for right now, try my darndest. Here, it's all I'm really doing to get the extra leverage on this. Which even then it seems like it doesn't want what I need. There we are. Letting tension off once. Checking all the pulleys. Belts looks lined up where it's supposed to be. Alright, belts on. This thing's ready to fire up and check the timing. Alright, unfortunately I just made an adjustment and I started it and you could hear it running really shitty because it's the timing is too retarded. So I adjusted it a little bit, but I'm going to try again, see if I can. Alright, so I'm going to let you listen to this. I'm just going to do it eyeballing it by sound first, and then I'm going to get the timing light, but you'll hear what I'm talking about. It's smoothed out quite a bit. I was just advancing it until that point. Now I'm going to check it with a timing light. Show you how to do that now. Just showing you what I'm doing from the front end. There's the distributor, and as I rotate it counterclockwise, it bogs down a lot. Doesn't really seem to want to run great. Then when I advance it a little more, right about to where 10 degrees was, gets a lot smoother. So that's how I did it without the timing light, just from the jump. I think my idle circuit needs adjusted too, and that might be why it's bogging down so much. But I'm gonna get the timing right first and then start messing with the carburetor. I'm shooting for 10 degrees before top dead center without the vacuum line hooked up, and then afterwards it'll let the advance take care of itself. I'm only going to set base timing. Alright, so for setting the ignition timing, I just got one of these cheapo Harbor Freight timing lights. The way this works is you want to clip it to your #1 spark plug wire, and every time it gets a signal there, it's going to flash, and that's going to correspond with your harmonic balancer. I'll show all that so I don't have to just explain it, but one thing I've noticed is that there's a U-shaped portion and then there's a sliding portion. I found that the U-shaped portion being on top of the plug seems to get a better reading with these crappy ones. Now another crappy thing about doing it alone is I gotta jump in there, start it without seeing what's going on. Everything's shaking. So I'm gonna go ahead and unplug this, set it here, run these wires back around here. So that way you could still see what I'm looking at too. Because I also need to see it, you know? Plug that back in. You can hear that? It's tell you how the light's working. Anyways, there's no interference though, that's why it's not clicking. So, I'll fire this thing up, show you what I'm doing. I'm guessing we're still very retarded. On camera, but I'm trying to get those marks just right. Video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. I think I got one more video in this series on the carburetor swap for this van, and I'll consider that enough information to where I imagine somebody can figure this out themselves. Like I said, I'm doing this after I'd already done the swap, just kind of going back through and showing you all the upgrades and how things are different, comparing and contrasting. So yeah, other than that, I just got the carburetor tuning video coming up next, and then I call this series, playlist, whatever, I'm going to go ahead and call it done. This should be useful for changing any old distributor though. I mean, the only thing coming off of here, little module, right, with fat connector. And come over here, just one last time. The only thing coming off of this distributor is a vacuum diaphragm. It does the exact same thing. Instead of a sensor, it's a physical plunger. So as the vacuum increases or decreases, it holds a timing to change it. So if I'm at part throttle, that's what I'm shooting for. There's two ways to do it. I can hook it straight to manifold vacuum, or I can hook it into the side of the carburetor. This won't see vacuum until the throttle blade passes it. Gotcha. So normally manifold vacuum drops as you push the gas. This jumps a little bit. So it won't start until you push the gas, and then it starts to, it's a timed vacuum, so I call it. So that I have it hooked up to that, and basically what's going to happen is that at part throttle, it's going to release fuel,